We are very warmed to invite our first guest to join us. There she is. She's been a part of our lives for decades now. I call her rock royalty, Ella Hooper. Hi there.
Where's my crown?
Where is your crown,
Hello, Ella.
darling?
Thanks, lovely legends. Yeah, I mean, our music is hands down the best therapy for me too, and the cheapest.
True. What's your go-to for comfort music?
Oh, I have playlists and playlists of the stuff, and I mean, it's no joke. I don't think I would have coped with the last few years without certain songs that I can listen to up to, 20 times a day. Honestly, if I'm in a certain headspace and I need soothing, I put on a certain playlist that's got all sorts of weird stuff. Some of it you would never have heard of. My guilty pleasures are very random. And some of it, is incredibly mainstream, but it's whatever sort of sparks that calm or comfort, and it just works like magic on me, and I use it relentlessly. I hope everyone does that as well, right? It's just such an amazing go-to that's in your pocket these days on your bloody iPhone, is the ticket to feeling completely different or self-soothing or getting G'd up or losing the nerves. I mean, what can't it do?
Yeah. Are you aware that you are that for other people? Like when you're making music, that's kind of beautiful, but also freaky to imagine that you're someone's therapy.
That still blows me out. Like to switch, to flick the switch and put the shoe on the other foot. No, I can't quite believe that, because of course I don't listen to my own music like that. That will give me a nervous breakdown. Listening to my own music. Like, that's not right, but it's such an honor, and I do get those messages, and especially with some of the new stuff, the new music I've been releasing. I've only got 2 new tracks out. It's a day of new releases, Miff. It's like, so exciting. But when those messages come in, I just feel blown away that I might be providing that for someone else. Yeah.
You provide it for other people and you get it from other people's music, but in terms of your own songwriting, is that a kind of therapy for you too? The creativity?
Oh, so much so. That's my favorite part of the whole crazy gig of being a musician or being a performer, entertainer. I'm a little bit of all of those things, but it's really the songwriting where I can work through something in that format. It's always fascinated me, and now that I do that for a living, it's just, again, it's quite magic. I think a lot of songwriters try to explain what makes a song moving or what makes it connect more than song A to song B. Sometimes you don't bloody know. You think you've done your best work, your most, highfalutin songwriting job on song A, but it's song B that really cuts through and everyone goes crazy about and cries to, and you're like, wow, you don't know sometimes. But I think it might come down to how much of your raw emotion got through the songwriting process. If a lot of it comes through, then you're probably on a good wicket.
So that implies, though, that you at times have to make a decision, and as a writer too, how much of yourself you'll share. And if you're at a crossroads in writing a song, do you she's like, oh, do you protect yourself?
Yeah, definitely. There's heaps of songs of mine that have hit the scrap heap because I'm just too shy to put them out. If it's just so obvious who it's about and what the incident that inspired it may have been, I get cold feet and sometimes wait for one that's a little bit more cloaked in metaphor or that can be less specific but just as effective. Although I've been told by my songwriting gurus, the more specific you are, the more personal you are, somehow the more universal. So I'm trying to challenge myself on that right now. I'm trying to really front up and be like, just put it all out there, even though you think it might be too specific to write about some conversation that your parents had driving down a back lane in Violet Town. But Paul Kelly does that. He's just, when I look at the greats, they are pretty... They don't hold back, and they share a lot of what you might imagine might have really happened. But then there's the whole other layer. Did it happen, or was that just genius songwriting? I don't know. I don't even know.
Don't prick my bubble. I believe it all happened.
Yeah.
Come on.
Oh, yeah. No, keep believing.
How do you get the confidence, though, to put it all out there? I mean, I think particularly as women, we've self-edited in so many ways in terms of how we appear and how we are perceived. And then when you put something down in song and you're challenging yourself to not self-edit in that way, because you know that the opposite actually works better. It's still tough, isn't it, to be truly open and to really, truly show yourself?
It's so tough. It's so tough. And Miff, I reckon you said the magic word. It's like, and as you get older, you know, like I'm nearly 40 now, but self-editing is something that you start to recognize more and more and more as you fill out as a person, and you know, you want to be more and more authentic and powerful and step into your power, and you realize just how much we self-edit so often, whether it's just at the shops, or, you know, in a personal situation or a retail situation. But I think that's why people go so crazy for musicians. And, you know, in my experience for rock chicks, for example, is that's a really powerful role when a woman takes, you know, the front job in a rock band and becomes that sort of strong, energetic force that propels rock band. People go so crazy for that because I think it's such a rare and occasional thing to see a woman doing, to just like lose their inhibitions and don't worry if you're gonna, you know, look like an idiot or a fool or a clown, because that's actually a really important part of being a good rock and roller, is a little bit of clowning, a little bit of joy, a little bit of sass, a little bit of anger, and showing some of those frustrations. I think that's why we go so nuts for the occasional really free female performer, because it's just, you don't get to do it in real life very much. I mean, ideally we do, and that's the journey, isn't it? But not there yet. Not there yet.
But it is so primal watching a really awesome performer of any kind, male, female, whatever. But I think you're right when you see women do it. It's liberating, and we all wish we could have. Yeah. We all, like, I feel like, because I'm 50 now, Ella, and I see it in my daughter. She's 13, and I'm like, babe, I want you to be unapologetically you at every turn. It's too late for me. Like, I'm not going to be the rock chick. I'm going to be, I don't know, cool mum, whatever. I'm entrepreneur, whatever you want to call me. I'm not putting myself down.
You are a rock star, though.
Yeah,
but it's very
in your own field.
Exactly.
But I just think, you know, we see women do it and I'm like, oh, I want a piece of that in me. And so that's the role you play as role models. It's very important.
And that's quite addictive to share that, because when I twigged to that, when I realized how freeing that was for others at a ripe old young age, I realized there was something so powerful, and that was like probably the secret sauce in Killing Heidi, why people sort of momentarily lost their shit for that project, was because it was so wild and raw and unapologetic from a really young woman, or at least with her face attached. And yeah, we rarely see that. So I think that's partly why it got such a big response. And I did that without even thinking. So then when the thinking comes in years later, it's much trickier.
Oh, no, thinking ruins everything.
Second guessing, we're good at that.
You want to be in the moment and in your heart and in your body. That's the joy of it, isn't it? Do you find, though, it's hard to switch that off in normal life?
No, not really. Because
or do you need to? Maybe don't switch it off.
Sometimes I have to call on that woman, that character, like that stage persona, or whatever the right psychological, psychobabble term is. Sometimes I need to dial her up for a meeting I'm having where I'm not as confident, or a situation where I could use a bit of her unapologeticness and strength and brashness or whatever. Because in my normal life, no, that's not exactly who walks around all day, having the interactions and running the show. But I do think it's really handy to have, it's Sasha Fierce. Beyonce has Sasha Fierce, and I have that sort of leopard print stage version of myself that can bring in that energy and hold that space and be more confident or whatever. But it's the music. When I'm playing music, I find it very, very easy to switch into that mode. In fact, it's not a choice. The music turns that on in me. And that is, I think, such a wonderful part of being a musician, is that you get to inhabit that so frequently when you're touring or gigging or writing.
The latest single, Achilles Heel, is beautiful, I've got to say. And but this is the opposite almost in terms of what we've been talking about, that sort of, really full on out there rock chick persona. It's actually, it's a very gentle, incredibly raw side of you that I think we haven't seen yet. And that's also, I imagine, quite difficult to tap into. But once you do, is it really freeing to be really honest in the way that you have been with this song?
Yeah, I think this is the 2.0, the adult version of what is then scary, like not that teenage brashness and all that kind of punk and energy. This is the adult version of what's really intense for adults, is sharing their true feelings, navigating relationships and themselves, like whether you're doing right by yourself or letting yourself down, it becomes this really, it's about, this whole new record is sort of about that internal work and that growth that you push for, and sometimes you learn it through relationships or loss of relationships, and the space that opens up after a breakup. So, that is just that's an incredible time. And again, as a songwriter, I sort of choose to use those incidents and the space that they create to delve deeper and find the healing in that and find the stories in that. But yeah, I'm so loving capturing the softer, more thoughtful sides of myself, which have always been there, but not as often made it to stage. And it's hard for me to trust that people are going to be as engaged and as entertained by my softer stories. But on the other hand, of course they are, because that's the whole other yin to the yang, and we all have that.
Yeah.
Well, it helps you feel seen when you hear an artist or a writer reflect your own experience in life. And even if it's the opposite to you, it allows you to reflect on your own experience in life. And Stacey on Facebook was saying there's nothing more freeing than being at a live gig and letting go. But equally, I reckon, and I would love to know what it feels like from your perspective, when you're in a gig and someone sings something so, that raw, beautiful, gentle song, and there's that silence in a space. And I'm feeling goosebumps just thinking about it. What is it like for you up there, knowing you created that?
Well, I haven't done it yet, so that's going to be all happening very soon on tour. And I think I'm probably going to cry. Like, honestly, this new stuff is so emotional and so personal. And I've had a very ridiculously life-changing year with the death of both of my parents earlier this year. And some huge life changes post-COVID, and including the COVID period. My heart's just been sort of blown apart into a million pieces. So there'll be tears, and they will be mine, and they'll hopefully be the crowd's as well. And I know I sound a bit flippant about that, but that is when you've done your job right. When there is that silence and there is maybe some people having a sniffle, part of me will be super emotional and trying to hold it together, but part of me will be like, yes. Well done, tick.
Well, artists, you're a ringleader as well. It's an important part of what you do. I'm obsessed with the fact that you travel by train.
Oh, yes.
I love that. I really do. I once travelled, I had an 8-hour train trip through, name drop, Europe, from Austria to Germany, and it was the greatest 8 hours of my life.
Aww.
Just looking out a window.
Magic.
Is it magic for you? Why do you choose train travel?
Well, I can't drive.
I didn't know that.
I've got my L's. I got my L's quite recently, so I'm still working on that. But I think because when the band kicked off and I got so busy as a young person, it was right around that learning to drive age. And I also didn't want to be the designated driver, if you know what I mean. Like, I wasn't.
Oh, sure.
I wasn't meant to be behind the wheel for a few years there. And I think on the train, there's something about motion, and a lot of creatives say this for writing. There's the motion, you're not having to do anything, and I just get so turned on by the scenery and the rhythm, and that's kind of where I do a lot of my best work, is on the train. It's just always worked for me. I guess growing up so far from the city, 2.5 hours on that train from Violettown to Melbourne my whole life to do all the things that I wanted to do. But those periods of calm, it's a real threshold, and you arrive wherever you're going. You arrive excited in the city to see what's going to happen, and you're not stressed and you haven't been looking for a park. You're just ready to go.
Yeah.
And in the inverse, going back to the country, I have time to cool down. I have time to let the media jobs go or the gig that went well or not well go. And I arrive back in the country so calm and ready to absorb that. So I think it's a real unsung another form of therapy, is just giving you time to go through these thresholds slowly and gently. It's really good for mental health, I think.
Oh, it's a beautiful thing. And you get a cup of tea in a styrofoam cup with a little biscuit.
Yes.
And there's nothing quite like it, or a glass of wine in a plastic cup
Totally.
on the way home. That's
well,
great.
in Europe,
dangerously hot cup of tea that's like,
Oh, yes.
all things.
That's true. I had French champagne on that, and I was traveling by
wonder it was a
myself.
great day.
Oh, well, I was traveling by myself for the first time in my life, so I had no family. I had no one saying, "Do what we want to do." I was like, "Nah, I'm doing only what I want to do."
I think your train experience is a little bit different than our V-line experience, Miff, and I think you're having the very nice high class version of.
It's true, but I love V-Line as well. I think, train travel in Australia is pretty fun. I had one last question for you, actually, Ella, because over the weekend I watched Elvis, the movie.
I haven't seen it yet.
It's
I don't know
so
why I haven't
great.
seen it.
Have you seen it?
No.
Oh, it's great. It's great. But that's not my question. I also watched the Foo Fighters tribute concert to Taylor Hawkins on the weekend, right?
Oh, so sad.
So sad. But it got me thinking, is rock and roll a very unhealthy career? Like, is it just a damaging life? Because it feels like people struggle to process what it means to be a rock star. And I worry for you.
Technically, yes. The stats are in and they're not good. They're not good at all. Professional musicians or rock and rollers have a much shorter life expectancy. They're much more prone to depression and anxiety and severe mental health conditions and physical conditions too. It's not traditionally ever been a healthy lifestyle, but we are trying to change that. There are some amazing organisations like Support Act, and it is Australian Oz Music T-shirt Day coming up soon, which is a great way how you can support Act, who supports musicians and the behind the scenes people, crew especially, technicians. They live some of the hardest lives, and it can be a lonely life. It's physically grueling. It is no walk in the park, and we hype it up because it's fun. Yes, the bit you see is fun. The bit you don't see, and Myth knows like all too well, like there is just a lot of not fun around the glam and the fun. And I think it's really great to talk about that, because sometimes you don't get a lot of sympathy if you're a good looking man or a woman and you have this fun job called rock star. Doesn't mean that you're not having a shit time behind the scenes. So we should just be aware of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well said, I think, Ella. And I think add to that too, the sexism that has been recently uncovered in terms of that huge report that was done into not just performers' experiences, but within the industry itself in terms of the record companies. Yeah. There's a lot of issues with it, and Support Act is a wonderful organisation that are doing great things. But now I think we're starting to realise there's a lot of other things that really need to be done from the ground up. Yeah. And a lot of structures need to be totally torn down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
But I feel like I'd like to acknowledge that the industry is so precious to us, and going back to what we said right at the top of this conversation gives us life, and I have deep gratitude to every player in the industry on stage and off, because we would be lost without it. So thanks, Ella.
Thanks, guys.
So I should just mention you are touring in October, and the album is there as well. So make sure you get yourself around it, because it's beautiful, and go and see Ella wherever you can.